You're listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life, the podcast for accomplished professionals who want to identify what's next in their career, then make it happen without compromising what matters most. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, an executive and career life coach, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to feel more energized about your work again, this show is for you. So let's get into it. I am so excited about our guest expert today, talking about communications. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation that I had with Amanda Box. In particular, we talked about how to position yourself and tell your story. And she provides some really valuable tips for dealing with those communication traps that we want to avoid. And as often happens, after we stopped recording, we thought of one more really valuable tip to share. So stay into the end because there's a little bonus 2 minutes that I think is going to be really valuable for you. So let's get to it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm really excited about today's episode because this is one of the series where I'm bringing in guest experts to talk about some of the issues that my clients deal with so much. And today's expert that's joining me is a communications expert. So I'd like to welcome Amanda Box. Let me give you a little bit of information about Amanda, and then I'll ask her to speak a little bit more about her background. In addition to just general communications expert, she is a college professor. She's an interview coach. She's done a lot of training. And one of the things that I love and find very intriguing and can't wait to hear more about is that Amanda refers to herself as an unleasher of the awesome. So Amanda, you want to put a little bit more color on that and tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. It's certainly an honor. I call myself the unleasher of the awesome because I have spent my entire career helping people talk to each other, whether it's through conflict or interviews or presentation skills. And one of the most inspiring things about my job is when people can reflect what's on the inside very accurately to those they're speaking to. So the outside matches the inside. And that's really what effective communication is. And what I know is that all the awesome is already in there. And I get to help people bring that out. So that's why I call myself the unleasher of the awesome.
I love it. It's so motivating. And I don't know if I ever really thought about communication the way you just described it in terms of bringing the inside to match the outside, or I didn't put it as eloquently as you did, but we talk so much about being authentic now, and that really gets to the heart of authenticity.
And I love that. I mean, I nerd out on that because when somebody can really show a potential employer who they are, then that is a win. Again, the awesome is in there. We just have to learn how to show that. One thing that's really interesting that popped into my mind when you said you hadn't thought about it like that, when people have trouble at work, it's always about the communication. Well, we're not communicating. We have problems communicating. If we could just communicate better. But when communication is going well, it's really invisible. And then they just celebrate the win.
Ooh, that's nice. Good stuff. Okay, great. Thank you, Amanda. We're so glad that you're here. So one of the ways that communication has such application, obviously, for my clients, they're leaders, so they're communicating with people all of the time. Big venues, small venues, one-on-one. But in particular, a lot of the conversations we have are about them telling their own story, whether it's them seeking advancement in their own company or potentially considering a job transition. We're experts in ourselves, but we're not great at telling the story. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, that question, tell me about yourself, is a tricky one because if I can't tell you about myself, then what else can I do? And it's not a great reflection of somebody's competency, but man, it can be so awkward if someone asks me that question and then I botch it. So one of the things that we have to realize about communication is it is a physical skill. So in that sense, we have to think about how do we want to tell our story? We have to practice it out loud, and then we have to edit it. And so once you get that structure in place, you're not really worried about word for word saying it necessarily one way all the time. But the sweet spot is to say about 3 sentences, 4 sentences, because that question, tell me about yourself or tell me your story, most of the time it's kind of chit chat, depending on where you are. If you're on an airplane or you're just having conversation at lunch, and at the same time, you never know when you're being interviewed informally or formally.
That's a great point.
So we have to, and in those moments, we have to already be used to hearing our own voices talking about ourselves, because we go through our day talking, but we're really not attending to our own voices. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm on stage and I'm trying to say something about myself and I don't really have that worked out. And then I get in my head. That's what I call about it. And it can just get really awkward really fast.
That's
So,
the killer. You
yeah.
get in your own head and you totally derail yourself.
You do. You just kind of unravel in the moment. So I always like to have a first sentence. So I call myself the unleasher of the awesome. I've spent my entire career helping people talk to each other, whether it was in the college teaching setting or helping people with interviews or helping people through conflict. So that's kind of a version of what I might say in lots of different kinds of settings. So, and then if I'm in an interview, then there are lots of right ways to do it. But the mechanics of it are to have 3 to 5 sentences, say them out loud, so that you can adjust them to whatever specific instance you're in. If you need to tell a specific story, maybe you're relating to someone. Yeah, I know what you mean. I call myself Unleasher of the Awesome. I was in San Diego last week and this happened. What I learned from that is, and then boom, stop talking. So, and what I would say will help people is your habits are going to inform whatever performance is happening right now. So I want to practice at a low level of consequence. So in my everyday conversation, I want to attend to my own voice. I want to treat this conversation in a way where I'm paying more attention to it, being more polished and being more eloquent and probably being less wordy for me anyway. And
For many of us, I think. Yeah.
And so then I get into this habit. Successful people are fanatical about habits. And so for communication, you just have to develop the habit of the structure that works, practice that in low stress settings so it becomes your habit, because we're not going to rise to the occasion. We're just going to fall back on our training. It's the same for communication. So, and then like, for example, I helped someone with a medical school interview the other day. And that dreaded question, tell me about yourself. And so we tweaked it. That last sentence needs to be, whatever you say, boom, 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 boom. And I'm really excited to talk to you about medical school today. So then we can kind of really fine tune it to what I'm doing in this very moment. So it's an easy breezy question. After you have some things to say, you practice it a few times and there you are.
That's so helpful because it's really accessible. You're not suggesting rocket science. What you're thinking, you're suggesting prepare how you want to enter that conversation. Your 3 to 5 sentences you said. I like what you said about say it out loud.
Yes.
So that it feels comfortable in that. Because, being prepared, I think, can allow you to be smooth and relaxed. And if you're staying out of your own head and you're relaxed, it enables you to take questions, to shift where they need to go, that kind of thing, rather than you sort of reciting a script. Oh my gosh, I got it wrong. And then you send yourself off in the wrong direction.
Yes, I say this till I'm blue in the face, and you said it eloquently as well. I just call it quit trying to work on this precise, perfect answer and connect with the person you're talking to. And that's what we do in conversation, but we get thrown off because all of a sudden it's a performance instead of a conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And I like what you said too about connect. I think that's right, because whatever situation you're in, if you're interviewing for something, if you're just meeting somebody for the first time, making that connection puts everyone at ease, and it just makes it more interesting. One of the things that is inherent in what you're saying too is this is a skill like any other skill that you can practice. If you think about it, you practice and you prepare. And so inherent in that is there's no shame in not being born knowing how to do this. You can learn.
Oh, sure. That's what's so crazy about it is no one is born being eloquent. Now, somebody like me, I was born more extroverted, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to do a great job with a speech. What it might mean is that I'm overconfident and underprepared. That's not a good communication plan.
Yeah. Something else you said I think is important too has to do with silence. And I think sometimes we get nervous and we talk to fill silence, and silence can be your friend. Say what you have to say and stop talking.
Remarkably, I have to coach that very concept to my clients a lot. Just stop talking. And so we have little tricks for that. For example, if I'm worried, someone's asked me a question, I've answered it, but all of a sudden I'm like, I'm talking too much. Why am I talking too much? Then I put in what I call a little pocket phrase in there. And that would just be little words you keep in your pocket to pull out to bridge this little awkward moment. And so if I'm worried, or one of my clients is worried about being rambly, I teach them to say, in a nutshell, boom.
That's so great, because just like with anything else, if you prepare for, if I catch myself talking too much, which is you getting in your head, you've prepared for how you're going to get out of your head and how you're going to harness that behavior. That's really, really helpful.
Or if you're just really excited, like for me, I could talk. I mean, I love my field. Like I watch a conversation like any normal person would watch a football game. That's how I nerd out on that conversation. So I might get really excited about a concept. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, they probably do not care about that. And so I'll make a joke. Oh, Professor Box needs to calm down, and I'll kind of get out of the conversation that way.
Yeah. There are worse things than being really enthusiastic about your subject matter, right? But yeah, you need to be aware too when you're taking people with you and when you're walking away without them.
Yeah.
Amanda, or I should say Professor Box, let me ask you another question. Why are interviews so hard? It's amazing to me. My clients are really accomplished professionals, leaders in their field. Interviews are hard for a lot of us. Why is that?
I think they're hard for everyone. To me, in the communication world as a professional, interviews are the hardest thing to pull off successfully. And it's because of this. They're supposed to sound just like a casual conversation. An interview is not a casual conversation. It is a performance, and there are big things on the line. And it might be a promotion, it might be a new job, it might be an acceptance of a proposal that you want to do. There are lots of versions of interviews too, not just going for that new job. But it's because of that discrepancy right there. It has to sound impromptu, but it's a performance. So how do we prepare and get structures in place to where I can be present and be connecting with the person I'm talking to and be polished and professional?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And layer on to that, something that when I was a corporate exec and I was interviewing people, but anytime I've interviewed or coaching clients to interview, and maybe it's even harder now, the interview has to go both ways. They are interviewing you to see if you can perform in the job and would be a fit for their company. And you should be assessing whether their company is the right fit for you and whether they're the boss that you can flourish under. So there's this performance aspect of it, but there's also this sort of information gathering aspect of it.
Yes. And at the same time, you can't be sure they're going to do a good job with that interview.
Boy, is that true. No, it isn't. It's something that comes up with my clients a lot. I'm so glad you brought that up.
And that's why you have to me, as you're preparing for an interview, how I like to think about it is, okay, let's lay out all these puzzle pieces. And I'm going to think about what I want this person to know about me. And then when I have the first opportunity, anything on that planet of how I can plug this into the conversation, then boom, that's my opportunity. And when interviewers are talking too much, if I spend an hour with somebody and it's an interview and they don't let me talk, I don't want to go out of there with them knowing nothing about me. So I've got to be able to jump in there and wedge in some information, even when they have not asked me that question. Because no one teaches you how to do an interview either, really. I wish they would. Maybe I need to do that.
Yeah.
So we get this idea of, thinking through, strategizing about how do I tell the truth, of course, in a way that reveals what I want to about me. So we can prepare all these things and then they're ready. We just pick them up and put them in there when we can.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I like that. It reminds me of some media training that I had in a previous life. And one of the things they tell you is you don't necessarily have to answer the question you're asked.
Oh, that's exactly
answer the
right.
question you want to answer as long as it's related. So in that way, it sounds like you're advising take a little bit of control to make sure you can get your message out.
I would take a lot of control.
Okay.
Because, you just have this short period of time to reveal what you want to about your character and your experiences and your abilities. And you've got to be able to do that in a way that is likable. And so to pull in these experiences that reveal those things about you, that outsmarts a lot of the awkwardness. I mean, there's so many terrible stories about interviews that went bad. One of my friends was interviewing someone for a job, and when they asked, "What are your hobbies?" the person said, "I like to take naps." No, you can't tell your future employer that you like to take naps.
I didn't even know that was a hobby.
Well,
it's actually a good point because you do want to reveal something about yourself, but that doesn't mean you want to reveal everything about yourself. So you might even need to plan ahead for that.
Yeah, I think you need to plan ahead for as much as you can because you don't want to be blindsided. But you also need to prepare for when you do get blindsided. And there are tricks for that too. Because your brain only needs a second or two to think about, what do I know? You always know something. So if you ask me some ridiculous question like, do you like sticky notes or Diet Coke? Good question, Randy. I've never thought about that. And so I'm just kind of paraphrasing. I'm reacting to the funniness of it. And that's that you just need a second or two. Your brain just needs a second or two. And then to me, I would follow that with, here's what I know. That's a little pocket phrase. Here's what I know.
Great. So we've heard in a nutshell to kind of bring yourself back to focus. Here's what I know. I like that a lot.
Yeah, because you might not know anything about sticky notes or Diet Coke, but you know something. And so that's a different way of saying, I don't know. Here's what I know.
I got it. Here's another topic that I really want to get your input on because I hear this a lot as well. There are questions out there, the questions we desperately do not want to be asked, or they scare us. So like one example, there's a client that I worked with a while ago who separated from her company in a way that felt difficult for her. It wasn't something she necessarily wanted to be completely open about, but yet she believes in being honest and she wanted to go into this new working relationship in an honest way. So how do you advise people preparing and taking on the questions that scare them?
Well, that's where we start. You have to start with the hardest questions because you don't need as much help with the other ones anyway. So we need to get in there and work on questions like that. So I've had all kinds of clients in that very same situation. Maybe they've been fired. Maybe one of my clients took like 6 years to get through college, and he was embarrassed about that. How do we talk about that? Tell the truth in a way that reveals what you want to about yourself. Another client had some DUIs. Another client, it's just all kinds of things like that, where we would say that's part of being human. And so when someone is facing a question like that is very difficult, then what I like to do is really get the truth out of them. So, well, tell me what happened. Okay. All right. That's what happened. You were fired this was one of my clients' first jobs, and he got fired because he was on Facebook at work. So that's embarrassing, right?
Well, at least he wasn't taking a nap.
Well, I guess that is better. Yes.
That's an interesting thing to have to explain. So
right.
how did that work out? How do you approach it?
Well, so very directly and very succinctly. So for him, once I got some of his language, then it was basically like, yes, I was fired. And what I've learned from that is boom. And then stop talking.
Yeah.
Or it might be another sentence added to that. Yes, that happened. And what I learned from that is, A, B, and C moving forward. And so you just want to own it because it happened. Best case scenario, they won't ask you about that. But if they do and you're not prepared, you can really shoot yourself in the foot right there. But if you look them in the eye, and these are physical things, right? If I got fired from a job and I look right at you and I say, yes, that happened. What I learned from that is to understand A, B, and C. And going forward, I will never forget that lesson. Is that believable to you?
Yeah. No, that's
and in
really...
and in that little example, I didn't even really say anything. So I would, put real information in there from that person's experience. And you say it directly, you say it confidently, you say it louder and slower, and then stop talking. And if they want to know more, they will. But hopefully they would go right on. Because you don't want to accidentally be crazy defensive about something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the keys of being prepared to this, is so that you don't come across as defensive. You're taking ownership of the things that you should, but if you put yourself in a defensive posture for that question, that could lead you down a bad place for the rest of the interview.
Yeah. And being fired is one of the most humiliating things. And so you're dealing with a lot of internal strife, it's embarrassing and all the things that go along with that. So there's a lot of internal turmoil, but you've got to be able to own your spot, tell what you learned, what's going forward, and move on. That's the same strategy that I would advise somebody for a weakness. That's kind of another dreaded question. Okay, tell me about your weaknesses. Well, that's a really tough one to answer, because which weakness do you choose? You have to choose one that's honest, but you don't want to say, I like to take naps. You've got to pick something that's still palatable. And so I teach people a little structure for that too. And hopefully they would be able to kind of lead in with something like this. A few years ago, I really struggled with getting organized. And how I've learned to handle that is to have a solid, consistent system that's very doable, sustainable. This is what I use now. And I find that that's really helped me with that issue. So you're naming it, but I'm telling you how I've dealt with that in the past tense and how that's helping me right now.
Yeah.
Because essentially that's what we do.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. A question I have about that is around, sometimes if we're asked about a weakness, talking about something that's sort of done and dusted. We've mastered that one and we moved on. Does that come across as we don't have any weaknesses left? Because I think
No,
everybody's okay.
I think, I don't think so. I mean, or I've never seen that situation really. What they want to do is, do you have some self-aware? They're trying to find out what your weaknesses are. Mainly though, I mean, they just want to know, do I want to work with this person in front of me? So you've got to present that in a likable way.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the best strategy. I mean, because, if they want to go further, they will. If they want to say, well, it seems you've mastered that. What are you struggling with right now?
Yeah.
Well, I might have to think of a different answer right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to quit drinking so much Diet Coke. I mean, I might kind of honestly take it in a lighthearted way if I have the presence to be able to do that. But if I need a second, I can take a second. What am I struggling with right now? Good question. I think I would say working at home, I've really had to just find new ways of providing strong structure, boundaries, etc.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So anyway, you're just trying to, again, what I did is you just have the habit. Those things are a habit. Okay, paraphrase the question, affirm it's a good question, and just buy yourself a little bit of time. Because when you blurt out something, well, I mean, for me, I have to apologize a lot. Oh, I didn't mean that. And I don't want to be in that frame of mind in an interview. So if I get in the habit of just taking a little time on that front end, it puts me in a place of confidence.
That's great. Really, really helpful. Thank you so much. Okay. So you've told me so many things that sort of leave me wanting more. And I think that our listeners will feel the same way. So if they want more from you, if they want to read your blog, be in touch with you, talk to you about coaching, whatever that is, how can they find you?
I'm ridiculously easy to find. The name of my company is Box, BOX, Communication Inc. Website is amandabox.org. LinkedIn, Amanda Box, Communication Consultant. First of my name, Unleasher of the Awesome. And the email is, please reach out for any reason, box.amanda@iCloud.
Okay, great. And we'll put those links in the show notes so that folks who are listening will know how to find you.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun to talk with you today. I hope people can grab a tip or trick and just kill that next interview.
Look, I've grabbed a couple of tips and tricks, and I feel very confident that our listeners will as well. So thanks for spending the time with me. I enjoyed it so much.
My pleasure.
I really hope you found that conversation helpful. I learned some great tips. And coming up is that bonus that I promised you that I think will be really helpful. So it's worth the extra 2 minutes. Listen in. One other question that I get sometimes, or sometimes I don't get the question, but I sense it in the discussion, is people are concerned about they may feel nervous, but they want to seem relaxed. And how do they manage that? Do you have any tips for that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question. There are a couple of things. One, talk louder and slower. I say that all the time, and I'm sure my clients get tired of it, and I don't care. If you're a little louder, a little slower, you seem calmer, more authoritative, and just more confident overall. The other thing, the classic sign of nervousness is the and. So real quickly, basically your brain can just listen and think so much faster than you can talk. So when there's this least little bit of silence and I'm on stage, the brain can kind of freak out and think, why is there silence? I'm supposed to be the talker. Why am I not talking? Blah. It can really panic at any kind of little silence. So this is one of the important habits when we edit out things that don't work and edit in solid communication habits. So when in everyday conversation, when you hear yourself saying, and, okay, any of those repetitive phrases, then if you will just close your mouth, you won't be able to say those because they begin with vowels or they have a lot of vowel sounds in them. So in my everyday conversation or in anybody's just daily talking, when you notice that, just close your mouth, take a sec, pick back up wherever you need to. So you're editing out the ands and ums. And if you do that, then you're not going to do it when you get in the interview. So you're louder, slower. You don't have any ands and ums or any hedgers or fillers like that. And you are doing beautifully if you can build in those habits.
Wow, that is so helpful. It's so simple. I know for myself that that's something that I will try and put in practice. Because my husband's been telling me to close my mouth for years, but
that's the answer to a lot of problems, right? Just close your mouth.
Well, thank you for those tips. I think that's going to be really helpful for people. And one of the challenges is once you become aware that you're saying that, it can, if you're aware that you're saying or and or whatever, it can kind of take on a life of its own. And so having a tip, rather than saying to ourselves, don't say don't say and, when you can flip it to something you can do, close your mouth. I think that's going to be really helpful. I can't wait to try it.
I'm glad.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.